that left the studio audience gasping and cameras still rolling as security was called to the set. The studio lights were hot that afternoon. Tamron Hall sat in her signature chair, poised and professional as always, ready to welcome her guest. Across from her, Meghan Markle settled into the plush seat, cameras capturing every angle. The audience applauded warmly. This was supposed to be a conversation about empowerment, about finding your voice, about standing up for what you believe in. Nobody could have predicted what was about to unfold. No, Tamron opened with her trademark warmth. I am so thrilled to have you here today. Welcome to the show. Meghan smiled, but there was something different in her eyes. Something sharp. Thank you for having me, Tamron. Though I must say I expected a larger studio. The comment hung in the air for a moment. Tamron, ever the professional, laughed it off. Well, we make it work. We have an incredible team here, and our audience is just fantastic. The audience clapped, but you could feel the temperature in the room shift just slightly. I suppose, Meghan said, glancing around with a look that could only be described as dismissive. I have done quite a few interviews, you know. Bigger platforms. More prestigious outlets. This is different. Tamron's smile never wavered, but her eyes flickered with something. Recognition. And perhaps that this was not going to be the interview she had prepared for. Of course, and we are honored to have you here with us today. I wanted to start by asking about your recent charity work. You have been involved in some really meaningful projects. Meghan shifted in her seat, crossing her legs, examining her nails briefly before responding. Yes, well, when you have my level of influence, you feel a responsibility to give back. Not everyone understands that. Not everyone operates at that level. Most people, frankly, cannot even imagine the kind of reach I have. I think many of our viewers are involved in their communities in powerful ways, Tamron offered gently. Meghan waved a hand dismissively. Sure. Bake sales and local fundraisers. That is nice. But I am talking about global impact. Real change. The kind of thing that requires connections most people simply do not have. There it was again. That edge. That subtle superiority that was becoming less subtle by the second. Tamron nodded, her professionalism holding strong. Absolutely. Giving back is so important. Can you tell us about the organizations you have been working with? I work with several, Meghan said, waving her hand vaguely. Too many to name, really. The thing is, Tamron, and I mean this with respect, but I think your audience might not fully grasp the scope of what I do. This is a smaller show, a smaller demographic. I usually speak to people who are more, how should I say, globally minded. The studio went quiet. You could hear the camera operators shifting uncomfortably. The audience members glanced at each other, unsure of what they were witnessing. Tamron leaned forward slightly, her voice still calm, still measured. Well, our audience is incredibly engaged and thoughtful. We cover important issues every single day, and I think they would love to hear about your work, regardless of how you perceive the size of our platform. Of course, Meghan said, but her tone suggested she did not actually agree. I just think it is important to be honest about these things. Not everyone has access to the circles I move in. Not everyone can understand the pressures of living at my level. Tamron took a breath. I think many people face tremendous pressures in their own lives. Different circumstances, certainly, but pressure nonetheless. Single mothers working multiple jobs. Families dealing with illness. People fighting for justice in their communities. Meghan laughed, but it was not a kind laugh. That is sweet, Tamron. Really. But you are comparing apples to oranges. What I deal with, the scrutiny, the global attention, the expectations, it is on a completely different scale. You would not understand. You could not possibly understand. Help me understand then, Tamron said, her voice still steady, but with a new firmness underneath. What is it that you think makes your experience so different? Because I would genuinely like to know. Everything, Meghan said, spreading her hands as if the answer was obvious. The media follows my every move. Every outfit I wear makes headlines. Every word I say is analyzed by millions. Every decision I make is scrutinized. Can you say the same? Does anyone care what you wear to work? A few audience members gasped quietly. Tamron smiled, but it was the smile of someone who had just about reached their limit. I have been in this industry for over 2 decades. I have covered war zones. I have interviewed presidents and activists and survivors of unimaginable trauma. I have built a career on listening to people and telling their stories with dignity and respect. So yes, I understand what it means to be in the public eye. I understand pressure. I understand responsibility. But not like me, Meghan insisted, leaning forward. Not on my scale. You have a nice show here, do not get me wrong. It is cute, but let's not pretend we are on the same level. I mean, look at this set. Look at these chairs. I have been on Oprah's couch. I have sat across from world leaders. I have dined with royalty. This is quaint. This is small time. The audience gasped. So audibly gasped. Some people shifted in their seats, uncomfortable witnessing this train wreck in real time. Tamron sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was steel in it now. Meghan, I invited you here to have a genuine conversation, to talk about things that matter. But I am not going to sit here and let you disrespect this show, this team, or this audience. We do important work here. We tell important stories, and we do it with integrity. Oh, come on, Meghan said, rolling her eyes. Do not be so sensitive. I am just being honest. People appreciate honesty, do they not? There is a difference between honesty and arrogance, Tamron said quietly. Meghan's face changed. The mask slipped. Excuse me? How did you just call me arrogant? I said there is a difference between honesty and arrogance, Tamron repeated. And right now, you are showing a lot of the latter. Meghan stood up abruptly, her microphone nearly falling off her lapel. I do not have to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly does not understand who I am or what I represent. Tamron remained seated, composed. I understand exactly who you are. You are someone who came on this show, accepted our invitation, and has spent the last several minutes insulting everyone in this room. That is who you are showing us right now. This is ridiculous, Meghan snapped. I have done interviews with actual journalists, real professionals, not someone hosting a daytime show that barely anyone watches. The audience erupted, not in applause, but in shock. Voices rose. Or someone shouted, "That is so rude!" Another person yelled, "Apologize!" Tamron stood now, her full height evident, her presence commanding. Meghan, I am going to give you one opportunity to apologize to my team and to this audience. Apologize? Meghan laughed, a harsh sound. For what? For telling the truth? For having standards? I think not. Then I am going to have to ask you to leave, Tamron said, her voice clear and firm. Meghan stared at her, eyes wide with disbelief. You are kicking me off your show? Yes, Tamron said simply. I am. You cannot do that, Meghan sputtered. Do you have any idea who I am? I know exactly who you are, Tamron said, and that is why I am asking you to leave. This show is built on respect. Respect for our guests. Respect for our audience. Respect for the stories we tell. And you have shown none of that today. Meghan's face flushed red. This is outrageous. This is completely unprofessional. Wait until people hear about this. Wait until the press finds out that you kicked me off your little show. They can hear whatever you want to tell them, Tamron said calmly. But right now, you need to leave. Fine, Meghan spat. Fine. I did not want to be on this second-rate show anyway. I only came as a favor. I only agreed because my team thought it would be good for your ratings. Tamron did not flinch. "Security, can you please escort our guest out?" Two security guards appeared from the wings, professional and calm. Meghan looked at them, then back at Tamron, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You will regret this," Meghan said, her voice shaking now. "You have no idea what you have just done." "I know exactly what I have done," Tamron replied. "I have stood up for my show and my audience. That is my job." Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair, yanking her microphone off so roughly that it squealed with feedback. "This whole thing is a joke. You are a joke. This entire production is beneath me. The lighting is terrible. The questions are basic. This whole setup is amateur hour." The security guards stepped closer, gently gesturing toward the exit. "Get your hands off me," Meghan snapped at them, even though neither had touched her. "I can walk myself out. I do not need to be escorted like some common criminal. Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea who you are throwing out of here?" One of the guards spoke softly. "Ma'am, we are just doing our job." "Your job?" Meghan laughed bitterly. "Your job is to protect important people. I am important. She is the one you should be worried about. She just assaulted me verbally on national television." But the guards remained, following protocol, staying close as Meghan stormed toward the stage exit. She turned back one last time, pointing a finger at Tamron, her hand shaking with rage. "Everyone will know about this. Everyone will know how you treated me. How unprofessional you are. How small and petty this show really is. My lawyers will be calling. My publicist will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. You just ended your career, Tamron. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Tamron stood there, unmoving, her face serene. "Take care, Meghan." That was it. The final straw. Meghan let out a sound of pure frustration and disappeared through the curtain, the security guards following close behind. The sound of her heels clicking angrily echoed even after she was out of sight. From backstage, her voice could still be heard, muffled but audible, still complaining, still raging. For a moment, the studio was completely silent. The cameras were still rolling. The audience sat frozen, processing what they had just witnessed. Some people had their hands over their mouths in shock. Others were shaking their heads in disbelief. A few were already whispering to their neighbors, trying to make sense of what had just unfolded before their eyes. Tamron turned to face them, taking a slow breath, composing herself, letting the weight of the moment settle before speaking. "Well," she said, a small smile playing at her lips. That was unexpected. The audience erupted, not in shock this time, but in applause. Thunderous, standing applause. People were on their feet immediately, cheering, clapping, some even whistling and shouting words of support. "You go, Tamron!" someone yelled. "We love you!" another voice called out. They were applauding Tamron, applauding her grace, her strength, her refusal to be disrespected in her own house, on her own show, in front of her own audience. Tamron raised her hands, trying to quiet them down, but the applause continued, wave after wave of support washing over the stage. She waited, patient as always, her eyes glistening slightly with emotion, until finally the noise began to die down and people started taking their seats again, though many were still smiling and nodding at her with approval. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much. But I want to say something important here. What you just saw, that was not about ego. That was not about me versus anyone else. That was about maintaining a standard. About remembering that respect is not negotiable. Not in this studio. Not on this show. Not ever." The audience listened, rapt. "We invite people onto this show from all walks of life," Tamron continued, her voice gaining strength. "Different backgrounds, different perspectives, different experiences. Rich, poor, famous, unknown. It does not matter. and we treat every single person with dignity. We listen. We engage. We create space for real conversation. We ask tough questions, but we do it with respect. But that has to go both ways. It has to be mutual. You cannot come into someone's home, into their space, and tear them down. You cannot accept an invitation and then spend your time insulting the people who invited you. More applause. Quieter now, but deeply felt. People nodding in agreement. I have been doing this a long time, Tamron said, looking around at the faces in the audience. And I have learned that you can disagree without being disrespectful. You can challenge ideas without insulting people. You can have difficult conversations without tearing others down. You can be honest without being cruel. That is what we try to do here every single day. That is the standard we hold ourselves to. Someone in the audience shouted, "That is right!" Others murmured their agreement. Tamron smiled, a real smile this time. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to continue with our scheduled programming, because that is what we do here. We show up, we do the work, we tell the stories that matter, and we do it with class. We do it with integrity. We do it the right way. The applause started again as the show cut to commercial. But backstage, chaos was unfolding. Production assistants were on their phones, talking rapidly, trying to get ahead of the story. Producers were having urgent conversations in hushed tones, huddled in corners. Legal was being called. The network executives were being notified. Everyone knew this was going to be huge. This was going to be everywhere by the end of the day. In one corner, a young production assistant was already scrolling through social media. "It is trending," she said to her colleague. "People are already posting about it. Someone filmed it on their phone." "Of course they did," the colleague replied. "This is going to be the biggest thing to happen in daytime television in years." Back in the studio, as the crew reset for the next segment, Tamron sat in her chair, taking a quiet moment. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was calm. She looked composed, but inside, her heart was racing just a little. Not from fear, not from regret, but from the adrenaline of standing up for herself, for her show, for her values. One of her producers approached, a worried look on his face. "Are you okay?" the producer asked quietly. "That was intense." Tamron nodded slowly. "I am fine. I am good." That needed to happen. She was not going to stop. She was not going to show any respect. So it had to end. "It is going to be everywhere," the producer warned, glancing around nervously. "The headlines are going to be insane." "I know," Tamron said, "but we did the right thing. That is what matters." "She is probably already calling her publicist," another crew member chimed in. Tamron shrugged. "Let her. The tape speaks for itself. People saw what happened. They heard what was said. I am not worried." And she was not, because Tamron Hall had built her career on authenticity, on showing up as her full self, on not tolerating behavior that diminished others. This was just another moment that proved who she was. The audience was still buzzing with energy. People were talking to each other excitedly, replaying what they had seen, amazed that they had been there to witness it live, in person. Some were already texting friends, their fingers flying over their phone screens. Others were posting on social media, their phones held low so production would not see, typing out play-by-play descriptions of what had just happened. "Can you believe that just happened?" one woman whispered urgently to her neighbor, her eyes still wide with shock. "I have never seen anything like it," the neighbor whispered back, shaking her head. "Never. Not in all my years of watching talk shows. The way Tamron handled that, she was amazing. She was so calm." "So calm," the first woman agreed emphatically. "I would have lost it so much sooner. I would have kicked her off after the first insult. How did Tamron keep her cool like that?" "That is professionalism. An older woman sitting behind them chimed in, leaning forward. That is what real class looks like. She gave that girl so many chances to stop, to apologize, to be respectful, and she just kept going. She was so rude, someone else added. So incredibly rude. Who does she think she is? Apparently, someone very important, the first woman said sarcastically. Too important for this show. Too important for all of us. Well, she is gone now, the neighbor said with satisfaction. And good riddance. Tamron did the right thing. A crew member counted down. Back in 5, 4, 3. The last two numbers were silent, just fingers counting down. The cameras were live again. Tamron was smiling, warm and genuine, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Welcome back, she said to the camera. We have a wonderful guest joining us now. Someone whose story is going to inspire you. And just like that, the show continued. Professional, polished, exactly as it always was. Because that was the standard. That was what Tamron Hall represented. Not drama for drama's sake. Not spectacle. But substance. Respect. Integrity. In the green room, Meghan was still raging, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Her publicist was on speakerphone, trying desperately to manage the situation. She had no right, Meghan was saying, her voice shrill. She had no right to speak to me that way, to throw me off her show. Meghan, the publicist said carefully, we need to think about how we want to handle this. Handle this. Meghan's voice was shrill now. There is nothing to handle. She is the one who should be worried. She is the one who just made a huge mistake. Do you know who I am? One phone call, and I can make sure she never works again. But even as she said it, even as she tried to convince herself that she was the victim here, there was a small voice in the back of her head that knew the truth. She had gone too far. She had let her ego take over. She had insulted people who had done nothing to her except invite her onto their show. Back in the studio, Tamron was interviewing a teacher who had started a program to provide meals to students in need. The conversation was warm, engaging, meaningful. This was what the show was about. This was what mattered. During the next commercial break, Tamron checked her phone. Messages were flooding in. Friends, colleagues, industry veterans, all saying the same thing. Proud of you. You did the right thing. That took courage. One message stood out. It was from Oprah. Grace under fire. That is how it is done. Tamron smiled. She put her phone away. The show was almost over. Just one more segment. One more conversation. But she already knew how she felt about it. No regrets. Not one. Because standing up for what you believe in, for the values you hold dear, that is never wrong. Even when it is hard. Even when the cameras are rolling and the whole world is watching. The final segment wrapped smoothly. The teacher interview had been beautiful, heartfelt, exactly the kind of story Tamron loved to tell. The audience applauded one final time. The crew began breaking down the set. Another show complete. Another day done. Tamron sat in her dressing room afterward, removing her makeup slowly, looking at herself in the mirror. She had done what needed to be done. There would be think pieces written. Social media would explode. People would take sides.